After Rebirth, I let my sister steal my fiancé. She never knew he was a traitor. I still remember the cold feeling of the executioner's blade resting against my neck. The entire royal court watched in silence as Duke Edward stood before the king with the same gentle smile that had once made me believe he loved me. "My apologies," he said calmly. "Rosie has committed treason against the kingdom." Treason. That single lie was enough to erase everything I had ever done. I desperately tried to explain that Edward was the real traitor, that he had been secretly selling military secrets to our enemies for years. But no one believed the daughter of a minister over the kingdom's most respected duke. Edward looked into my eyes one last time. There was no kindness left, only satisfaction. The executioner raised his sword. A sharp pain shot through my body. Then, darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't standing on the execution platform anymore. I was back inside my father's manor. Outside my bedroom, servants hurried through the corridors while preparing for an important guest. "The Duke has arrived. He has come to ask for Lady Rosie's hand." I slowly touched my own neck. There was no wound. I had returned to the very day my life had been destroyed. This time, I smiled. Edward wanted a wife, then he could marry someone else. My dear sister Lisa wanted everything that belonged to me. This time, I would gladly give him to her. My name is Rosie Ashford, the youngest daughter of Prime Minister William Ashford, the most trusted advisor to King Martin II of Valencrest. My mother passed away when Lisa and I were still children. After her death, father buried himself in his work, spending more time inside the royal palace than at home. He wasn't a cruel man, he simply wasn't there, and whenever he was, he always seemed to have a softer heart for Lisa. She looked so much like our late mother that everyone said it was impossible not to spoil her. Perhaps they were right, but little by little, that favoritism changed my sister. If I received a beautiful doll, Lisa wanted it. If father praised my piano lessons, Lisa suddenly wanted to learn as well. If relatives complimented my dress, she would refuse to wear anything until she had something prettier. At first, I believed it was simply childish jealousy, so I always gave in. The doll, the ribbons, the jewelry, the dresses. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than winning small arguments. I never imagined that one day, my sister would decide she wanted my future husband too. A few months earlier, father had organized a grand dinner at our manor for several nobles of the kingdom. Among the guests was Duke Edward Ashcroft, one of the most respected young nobles in Valencrest. The moment we were introduced, his attention never seemed to leave me. "My Lady Rosie," he said with a charming smile, "forgive my boldness, but I don't believe I've ever met someone as beautiful as you." Throughout the evening, he showered me with compliments. He praised my manners, my smile, even the way I spoke. Before leaving, he kissed the back of my hand and promised he hoped we would meet again very soon. In my previous life, I had fallen in love with him that very night. Over the following months, bouquets of flowers arrived almost every week. Elegant letters filled with sweet words followed shortly after, and Duke Edward visited our estate whenever his duties allowed. Everyone believed we were the perfect match, including me. Eventually, father announced that the Duke wished to formally ask for my hand in marriage. In my previous life, it had been the happiest day of my life. This time, it would become someone else's. After getting dressed, I walked toward the main reception hall. The servants were already preparing tea while father waited for our guest. Standing beside him was Lisa. The moment our eyes met, I recognized that familiar look, envy. She couldn't understand why the kingdom's most handsome and admired noble had chosen me instead of her. Over the past few weeks, she had done everything she could to attract Edward's attention. She laughed at all his jokes. She complimented his clothes, She even found excuses to accidentally bump into him during his visits. What surprised me wasn't Lisa's behavior. It was Edward's. Instead of politely keeping his distance from his future sister-in-law, he welcomed her attention. He smiled back, flattered her. Sometimes they laughed together as though I wasn't even standing beside them. Back then, I had ignored those little moments. I convinced myself he was simply being courteous. I understood they had been warning signs all along. Not long afterward, Duke Edward arrived. Dressed in an elegant navy coat embroidered with silver, he carried himself with the confidence that had once captivated me. After exchanging greetings, we all took our seats. Before Father could begin discussing the engagement, Lisa suddenly smiled. "Your Grace, you truly are the most handsome noble in the kingdom." Edward chuckled politely. "You flatter me, Lady Lisa." She sighed dramatically. "What a pity." Everyone turned toward her. "A gentleman as remarkable as you deserves a wife with experience." Her eyes shifted toward me. "Rosie hardly knows anything about managing a noble household." I quietly clenched my fists beneath the table. Just as in my previous life, she couldn't bear seeing something belong to me. Lisa laughed softly before speaking again. "Perhaps you should marry me instead." Silence. Father looked startled. The servants froze. In my previous life, I had immediately objected. I had desperately insisted that the engagement continue as planned, but not this time. A smile slowly appeared on my face. "I think that's an excellent idea." The entire room fell silent. Lisa blinked in confusion. "What?" I looked calmly toward Father. "Lisa has always admired his grace. If they truly suit each other better, I have no objection." Father studied my face for a moment. Then, without much hesitation, he looked toward his eldest daughter. Lisa had always been his favorite, perhaps because she resembled Mother so much, or perhaps because spoiling her had simply become a habit. Whatever the reason, he accepted surprisingly quickly. "If both of you agree, then I see no reason to oppose it." Finally, everyone turned toward Duke Edward. For just a brief second, I wondered if he would refuse, if he would insist that I was the woman he loved. Instead, he smiled. "As long as Lady Rosie gives her blessing, I would be honored to ask for Lady Lisa's hand." My heart didn't break. Not this time. It only confirmed what I already knew. A man truly in love would never exchange the woman he wished to marry so effortlessly. Lisa's face lit up with excitement. "I gladly accept." She tried to hide her triumph beneath a mask of false kindness. "Oh, Rosie, I'm only doing this because I don't want His Grace to be disappointed. One day you'll understand." I simply smiled. Of course. Inside, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Relief. Lisa believed she had stolen the greatest prize in the kingdom. She had no idea. She had just married the man who would destroy her life. Several months passed after Lisa's wedding. As the new Duchess, she carried herself with even greater arrogance than before. Whenever we crossed paths at noble gatherings, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her luxurious gowns, sparkling jewels, or the affectionate gestures Edward displayed in public. "Married life suits me perfectly," she would often say with a satisfied smile. "Edward treats me like a queen." In my previous life, those words would have shattered my heart. Now, I only felt pity. Instead of wasting my time competing with my sister, I focused on something far more important: stopping the future before history repeated it itself. One evening, Father hosted another banquet at our manor. Several ministers and high-ranking officials attended to discuss matters concerning the kingdom before dinner was served. Was the man I had been looking for, Lord Landro, the High Commander of Valencrest's royal army. He was nearly 10 years older than me, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair neatly combed back and sharp gray eyes that seemed capable of reading through anyone's intentions. His expression rarely changed, and even while surrounded by nobles, he carried himself like a soldier standing watch on the battlefield. Unlike most aristocrats, he had earned his position. After the meeting concluded, I noticed him standing alone on the palace terrace, quietly watching the sunset. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward him. "Good evening, Lord Landro." He turned politely. "Good evening, Miss Rosie." His voice was calm, respectful, yet distant. "You seem troubled," I observed. A faint smile appeared on his face. "Military affairs. I'm afraid they are matters a young lady shouldn't concern herself with." I looked toward the crimson horizon. "There is a traitor inside the kingdom." "Isn't there?" Silence. For the first time, Lord Landro's expression changed. His gray eyes locked onto mine. "How do you know that?" Very few people knew about the recent military failures. Several shipments of weapons had mysteriously disappeared. Enemy forces somehow anticipated troop movements. Someone was leaking confidential information, and yet, no noble woman was supposed to know any of it. I slowly met his gaze. "I have information that could help you, but not here." His eyes narrowed. Every instinct told him not to trust me. Perhaps I was attempting to manipulate him. Perhaps someone had sent me. Or perhaps this was an elaborate trap. Even so, the certainty in my voice unsettled him. After several long seconds, he finally spoke. "If what you claim is true, then we should continue this conversation somewhere private." He straightened his gloves. "Would you honor me by joining me for tea at my estate tomorrow afternoon?" I smiled politely. "It would be my pleasure." Without another word, he excused himself. Unfortunately, we hadn't been alone. From behind one of the marble pillars, two familiar figures stepped into view, Lisa and Edward. Judging by their expressions, they had only overheard the invitation. Lisa covered her mouth with a mocking smile. "My little sister, you've already found yourself another gentleman?" That was rather quick. I simply sighed. "I don't owe you an explanation." I began walking away. Before I could take another step, someone caught my wrist. It was Edward. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm enough to stop me. "You shouldn't spend time alone with Lord Leandro." His tone remained gentle, almost concerned. "People may misunderstand." I slowly looked down at the hand holding my arm. "Why does that concern you, Your Grace?" He hesitated. "Leandro is considerably older than you, and he isn't exactly known for his warm personality. I wouldn't want to see you hurt." For a brief moment, I almost laughed. The man who had ordered my execution in my previous life was pretending to worry about my future. I calmly freed my arm from his grasp. "My life is no longer your concern." Without looking back, I left both of them standing in the corridor. Behind me, Lisa slipped her hand around Edward's arm, though I noticed the uneasy expression crossing his face. For the first time, the Duke looked genuinely unsettled. The following afternoon, I arrived at Lord Leandro's estate. Unlike the lavish homes of most nobles, his residence reflected its owner. Simple, orderly, practical. Maps covered the walls of his study, while shelves overflowed with military reports instead of expensive decorations. Tea had already been prepared. After dismissing the servants, Landro spoke first. "You claim to know the identity of the traitor. I'll ask only once. How?" I looked directly into his eyes. "The man responsible is Duke Edward." His expression remained unreadable. "That's an extraordinary accusation." "It is. So you'll need more than suspicion." Taking a slow breath, I began explaining everything I remembered. The secret meetings, the coded letters, the hidden payments made through foreign merchants, the routes of stolen weapon shipments. even the names of several intermediaries Edward had used to hide his involvement. I spoke for nearly an hour. When I finished, the room fell silent. Finally, Leandro asked quietly, "How could you possibly know all of this?" For a brief second, I wished I could tell him the truth, that I had already lived through it once. Instead, I simply lowered my eyes. "I have my reasons. They're not easy to explain. He studied me for a long time. I still don't trust you." His honesty almost made me smile. "But if even part of what you've told me is true, I would be a fool to ignore it." Our partnership began. For the next 2 months, we met twice each week. While I quietly observed Edward's movements during noble gatherings, recording every suspicious meeting and conversation, Lord Leandro launched a discreet investigation through his most trusted intelligence officers. One by one, the pieces began falling into place. Secret payments, disguised messengers, encoded correspondence, meetings with merchants who secretly worked for enemy kingdoms. Every new report confirmed another part of my story. Eventually, even Lord Leandro could no longer deny the truth. Edward Ashcroft, the kingdom's most respected duke, had been betraying Valencrest for years, yet somewhere between strategy meetings, maps, and long evenings spent discussing evidence over cups of tea, something unexpected happened. The distance between us slowly disappeared. Leandro began asking for my opinion before reaching his own conclusions. He listened carefully whenever I spoke. Sometimes, he caught himself looking forward to our meetings more than the investigations themselves. Rosie wasn't merely intelligent, she was courageous, compassionate, and willing to risk everything to protect a kingdom that had never fully appreciated her. Without realizing it, he had begun to admire her, and admiration quietly became affection. One evening, as they reviewed the latest reports together, Leandro rolled up the map on the table. "We have enough evidence." His gray eyes met mine. "It's time." I nodded. The ceremony of royal honors. Every year, King Martin II personally awarded medals to the kingdom's greatest heroes. This year, the highest honor was meant to be presented to Duke Edward. Neither of us intended to let that happen. The day of the royal honors ceremony finally arrived. Every important noble in Valencrest gathered inside the grand hall of the royal palace. Golden banners hung from the towering marble columns, while musicians filled the room with elegant melodies. At the center of the hall sat King Martin II upon his throne. According to tradition, the kingdom's greatest contributors would receive medals of honor. This year, the highest distinction was meant for Duke Edward. He entered the hall wearing an immaculate white ceremonial uniform embroidered with gold, smiling proudly as nobles congratulated him. Beside him walked Lisa. Her crimson gown shimmered beneath the chandeliers as she proudly greeted everyone around her. She looked happier than I had ever seen her, completely unaware that everything she had built was about to collapse. Across the hall, Lord Leandro and I entered together. Without planning it, we had both chosen deep navy attire trimmed with silver. Several nobles quietly smiled at the sight. It was obvious we had become partners in more than just official matters. Leandro noticed their whispers. For once, he didn't seem to mind. King Martin II slowly rose from his throne. "Today we honor those whose loyalty and service have strengthened our kingdom." A servant stepped forward carrying the first medal. Just as the king prepared to continue, Lord Leandro stepped into the center of the hall. "Your Majesty, I humbly request permission to postpone today's awards." The room instantly fell silent. The king frowned. "For what reason?" Leandro's voice echoed through the chamber. "Because the man about to receive the kingdom's highest honor has betrayed it." Gasps spread through the crowd. Edward slowly stood. "My Lord Commander, surely this is some misunderstanding." Leandro ignored him. For months, military supplies have disappeared. Enemy armies anticipated our movements. Confidential reports reached foreign kingdoms. We investigated every possibility, and we discovered the source. He turned toward me. I was not alone in uncovering the truth. There is someone whose intelligence made this investigation possible. I asked Lady Rosie to step forward. Hundreds of eyes followed me as I walked calmly into the center of the hall. I bowed respectfully before the king. Your Majesty, I accuse Duke Edward Ashcroft of treason. The hall erupted. Lisa shot to her feet. That's absurd. She's lying. She's only jealous 'cause Edward chose me. Edward immediately nodded. Exactly. My former engagement clearly left Lady Rosie bitter. I ask His Majesty not to entertain such ridiculous accusations. I didn't argue. Instead, I unfolded the first document. This ledger records payments made through merchants operating near the eastern border. Then another. These coded letters match military movements that only a handful of nobles could have known. Another. These signatures belong to the Duke's personal secretary. Landro raised his hand. The great doors opened. One by one, royal investigators entered the hall. Then came intelligence officers, border inspectors, captured messengers, even merchants who had agreed to testify. Every witness confirmed another piece of the conspiracy. Every document strengthened the case. The king's expression grew darker with every page he read. Finally, he placed the last report upon the table. Silence filled the chamber. He slowly lifted his eyes toward Edward. Do you deny any of this? For the first time, the Duke couldn't answer. His confident smile disappeared. So, King Martin said quietly, it was you. Edward's fists trembled. For several seconds, he remained silent. Then, he laughed, a cold, bitter laugh. So what if it was? The entire hall froze. I spent years pretending to admire this kingdom, pretending to serve this crown. But why should I remain beneath an aging king when I deserved the throne myself? His eyes swept across the nobles. You were all fools. I only needed influence. I planned to marry whichever minister's daughter brought me closest to power. He glanced toward Lisa with complete indifference. It didn't matter whether it was Rosie or her. Lisa's face turned completely pale. What? Edward sneered. You honestly believed I loved you? You were nothing more than another step. I would have discarded you the moment you became useless. Tears streamed down Lisa's face. She staggered backward, unable to believe the man she had stolen from her sister had never cared for her at all. I looked toward the throne. Your Majesty, you've heard his confession. King Martin slowly rose. His voice thundered across the hall. Duke Edward Ashcroft, for treason against the kingdom of Valencrest. You are stripped of all titles and sentenced to death. Royal guards immediately surrounded him. For the first time, Edward looked afraid. He struggled violently as he was dragged from the hall. His screams echoed long after the doors had closed. Lisa remained frozen where she stood. Without Edward's title, without his wealth, without his influence, she possessed nothing. The luxurious life she had proudly flaunted vanished in a single afternoon. No noble wished to associate with the disgraced Duchess. Her friends disappeared. The invitations stopped. The servants left. The woman who had spent her life living through someone else's success found herself completely alone. As I quietly watched her leave the palace, I felt no joy, only peace. She had chosen this path herself. Several weeks later, Lord Leandro invited me to the palace gardens. The evening breeze gently stirred the flowers as we walked beside the fountain in comfortable silence. Finally, he stopped. Rosie. He looked at me with the same steady eyes that had once viewed me with suspicion. I've faced countless battles. But meeting you changed my life more than any war ever could. He reached into his coat and revealed a small velvet box. I cannot promise a life without hardship, but I can promise you something far more important. My loyalty, my honesty, and my heart. He knelt before me. Will you marry me? Tears gathered in my eyes. Someone was choosing me, not for my family, not for influence, not for power. Simply, for who I was. I smiled, yes. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I leaned forward and kissed him, warmly, gently. Looking back, I realized something. In my previous life, I believed losing Edward would ruin my future. But after being given a second chance, I understood the truth. The greatest gift my sister had ever given me was taking the wrong man away, and because of that, I finally found the right one.